Hello, you're listening to the Level Up Creators podcast. Amanda Northcutt here, founder and CEO. We help creators and digital thought leaders like you turn your knowledge and experience into rock solid recurring revenue, and we are so glad you're here. Today, my unique guest is Maura McInerney Rowley. Maura is the founder of Hello Mortal, a platform dedicated to helping people contemplate, prepare for, and manage life's inevitable end. Her journey into death care began after her mother, Maureen, died during Maura's junior year of college, a profound loss that reshaped her world and set her on an unexpected path. And then a few years later, a death at a friend's wedding became a turning point, redirecting her toward a calling she hadn't anticipated. In 2023, after contemplating death doula training, Maura joined the Lily House, a social model hospice on Cape Cod, as director of operations. These personal and professional experiences continue to fuel her mission to transform how we approach and plan for the end of life. Maura holds a degree in global studies in anthropology from the University of Vermont and an MBA from the University of Michigan. Welcome, Maura.
Hello. Glad to be here.
Thank you. So, Maura, I speak with subject matter experts day in and day out, professionals with expertise in sales, self-improvement, career coaching, high school football recruiting of all things, relationships, the types of experts that, they really span the gamut. But you're the only certified expert I know whose expertise lies in death and dying. And as we said before, your path to becoming an expert in the subject started with losing your mom just before your 21st birthday, which is, of course, my God, an unfathomable tragedy that I'm sure continues to shape your life every single day. And unfortunately, that's not the only unconscionable tragic death you've experienced. And so I'd be grateful if you would share, whatever part of your story you feel comfortable sharing, and then we can discuss your career trajectory and the exploratory path you took professionally between your mother's passing and early 2024 when you launched Hello Mortal. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Awesome.
I always love stealing a line from Andrew Garfield whenever I talk about my mom and her death. You might have heard it or seen it, but his famous line, he talks about grief is love with nowhere to go. But he says, if I cry, it's not out of sadness. It's because I love talking about her, his mom, so much, and same for me. And obviously there's a tinge of sadness there, right? Because you miss the person and you want them back, but it's really just love being expressed. And I find it interesting because sometimes when I share this story, I'm sort of stone cold and emotionless, and other times I just break down. So I never know what I'm going to give or someone's going to get. But yeah, my first experience with loss, I think with many people, was around pets. But my first real significant loss was my grandmother and then my own mother. And that occurred when I was a junior in college. My mom had been diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 5 years old. So she was in and out of remission my entire childhood. And her doctor often referred to her as Miracle Maureen. And so I naively thought, my mom would never die. And intellectually, I knew she would die eventually, but just not from cancer, right? And in our society, we also just avoid talking about death. So I think in some instances too, I thought she was immortal. She's my mom. Like she'll never leave. So her death really hit me hard. And I had about 2 weeks to spend with her, or less than 2 weeks actually. But from the time I got the call to the time we had her funeral, it was 2 weeks that had gone by. So I came home from college, spent a few days with my mom while she was briefly on hospice at home, and was able to be there by her side when she died, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And it comes with its own set of challenges, but I often wonder where it would be had I not gotten that experience. And at the social model hospice I helped open on the Cape, we help give people a similar experience where they can be at the bedside of the person they love as they're transitioning.
Wow. I so hate that you had to experience that one at all to this point in your life. But I mean, at such a young age, I can't even imagine. My mom is still living, thankfully, and like I am not ready to imagine a world without her. And you've had to go through your entire adulthood without your mom, and that's just tough. And
Yeah.
you know, that wasn't the only like major hit. So tell us about kind of the what happened between your mother's passing and then we've got to talk about some, wedding planning in Colorado
Hmm.
and then a death at a friend's wedding. So how did that all happen?
Yeah. It's definitely dark times after my mom died, as you can imagine, and I felt very isolated being in college. There weren't that many people I knew who had lost a parent or
Mhm.
anyone really close to them. Um, and after that, yeah, I had an experience where I was snowboarding and I experienced my first powder day ever. And it was in Vermont, of all places. Yes, they still get powder days on the East Coast. Since we're both in Colorado,
Yeah.
I can say that. Um, and I felt euphoria, or what I thought was euphoria, or whatever.
Mm.
Joy again for the first time in over a year since my mom had died. So I decided I was going to chase that feeling. Life was too short. I couldn't imagine being anywhere where I couldn't snowboard. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but at the time it was something I clung to, and that's how I ended up in Aspen. And snowboarding and working. And that's how I ended up in the wedding industry as well, because that was my first job right out of college. And um, it was a really uh, wonderful and challenging time in my life, but I ultimately left the wedding industry because it was making me so sad just going to all these weddings over and over again and being with the bride and watching them walk down the aisle and knowing my mom would never be there and I'd never get that experience with her. And it became too much for me to bear. Um, and so it's fascinating to me to see how I've come full circle, because we think of weddings and funerals at the opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to events, but they're really so similar because they're all about bringing people together and celebrating love and life and tradition and rituals and community. And so I had this kind of like smack in the face profound experience the summer between my first and second year of business school, where I was at a wedding for a friend I had met in Aspen, and we had bonded over the fact that we lost parents at a same young age. And she had asked me to read a poem about lost loved ones in the wedding. And then on the morning of, and this is a beautiful poem, I cry every time I read it. So if anyone listening needs a poem about lost loved ones in their wedding, happy to share it. Been given permission to share it. Um, so at the wedding that morning, the bride had to inform some of us who were in the wedding that one of her friends had died the night before. So we were all with this guy. We were out at the rehearsal dinner Friday, and then later on, he continued to go out and just tragically died. And I won't get into the details here, but it was that shock and that juxtaposition of the death at the wedding that really sent me into deep introspection of how similar these events are, but how we plan over a year for our weddings and funerals are planned in 2 weeks, often leaving the grieving family in crisis mode. And then I quickly went off, wedding was Saturday, Sunday morning. I was on a plane to Alaska to go backpacking um, with a bunch of people from business school. And I spent a week in the wilderness of Alaska, no phone, no internet, just with my thoughts, reflecting on what had just happened, reflecting on how my mother had died and her circumstances, and then had my own really scary moment where because it was pouring rain. Alaska in August, you either get rain or mosquitoes, and
Yeah.
we got rain. Um, pouring rain, freezing cold, fell down the mountain, like thought I was gonna have to get helicoptered out of there or something, was so scared. Had a friend behind me, one of my dear friends from school, Vivian, gave her such a fright that she said, I was afraid that you were gonna die. And it feels like so awful because she had just months later or earlier lost a friend to a freak accident in um, Moab or Zion or
Mm-hmm.
somewhere with flash floods. I think is it Zion Park? I forget.
Yeah. Zion National Parks in, yeah,
Zion. Yeah,
Utah.
I've never been. Um, but so she had literally just lost a friend to a tragic, like, outdoor accident. And then here I was right in front of her, like tumbling off of a cliff. And so it was that moment too, that was on our second to last day. So then the next day I had to hike 7 miles out on this what turned out to be only just a horribly sprained ankle, thank goodness. And yeah, it was these back-to-back experiences, and then I was in business school again, like less than 24 hours, because that's how things work in business school. It's a jam-packed schedule. And I had to pitch a business idea. And so I pitched this concept of wilderness hospice, because I was combining, being in the wilderness, thinking about my mom, how wonderful it would be to have your last moments there in nature, returning to earth in such a natural way. And that's where things sort of really kicked off for me. I just had that whole semester to research the funeral industry, the hospice industry, recognizing and learning how outdated and overwhelming and fragmented these spaces are, and that we can do so much better for people. And that's really where that whole journey, I think, came to a head, and I started to intentionally be like, okay, this is something I am interested in, I want to focus on, I want to learn more about.
Mm. Whoa. How far down did you fall?
Pretty far. I was lucky that I got stopped by a tree, but I'm a small person, like 5'1", and so my 60-pound backpack
Oh my
uh,
gosh.
was almost the size of me, and as I slipped, I tried to stop myself, and the weight of my backpack threw me over. Um, and yeah, it was quite a harrowing experience, for sure.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So what's next? After, you finished business school, I assume, and
Yeah.
then what happened?
So what's next is really, I mean, interesting time. I was in business school during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
part of it. So
Mm-hmm.
my first year was virtual. It sucked. Second year was in person. And I was having interviews for, 'cause typically people go to business school and then they go into consulting, investment banking, maybe
Yep.
tech. Small percentage of people try and start their own companies. Um, and all the interviews I was having, I was recognizing that I was dreading them. I was dreading preparing for them. I was dreading having the interviews, or even ones that I thought I was excited about. I'd walk away being like, you know, okay. And I really just wanted to work on my idea I had at the time, which by the end of business school, I had pitched in a few competitions and won some funding. So
Hmm.
I was walking away from business school with about, I don't know, maybe $20,000 in funding from pitches. And again, at the time, we had a pause on student loans, on repaying student loans. So it
Mm-hmm.
was sort of this combination of like, okay, I've got some validation from these pitch competitions. I'm going to have a period of time where I don't have to worry about paying my student loans back right away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it sort of feels like it's now or never. There's never a perfect time to get started or do anything, but it really felt like the universe was setting itself up for me to kind of follow this through. And so I did. But I had, I don't know if it was imposter syndrome or if it's also, um, part of the business mindset. I had personal experience in death and grief. I did not have professional experience, and that was really important to me to go out and seek, one, to understand the industry better, two, to understand if I wanted to be in this industry and in what capacity, because I could have
Mhm.
opened a funeral home, I could have become a death doula, I could have, gone into hospice, gone back to school to become a nurse. There's like a million things and ways to get involved. So I ended up getting my death doula training. I was fascinated by the concept when I heard about it and found out about it. And through that is how I got connected to opening the hospice on Cape Cod. And again, it was one of those things where it was like, it just kind of fell into my lap. Basically, I got the training, and then I was living in this rural town on Cape Cod, mostly retired folks, and someone was like, "Oh, you're a death doula. You have to meet the one other death doula in town who's
Mhm.
opening a hospice." And so
Ah.
we connected, and yeah, the rest is history.
Okay, so is this 2022 at this point? When is this happening?
I got the training in 2022, and then in 2023, um, opened the hospice.
Okay. All right. And then you went from that in 2023 to launching Hello Mortal earlier this year. We were recording in November of 2024. So what was that
Hmm.
kind of little transition like? And then how did you end up back here in Colorado?
Yeah, so opening and working at the hospice was eye-opening. I was worried
Mhm.
after I got my death doula training, how am I going to find clients? Uh, you know, uh, how am I just even going to utilize this? Because it's an interesting field, and that is a whole other topic too. But um, the hospice gave me a crash course um, experience in being a doula, and I'm so grateful for it. It completely changed my life. And at the time, I still had the ideas from business school, and
Mhm.
so I was trying to manage doing both. But I was also still exploring, what's the right space to be in and what do I really want to do and spend my time on. Um, and so I became obsessed with this idea of contemplating mortality because of all the great benefits it has and the fact that it's so taboo in our country to talk about death. Yet it's something that's going to happen to all of us and to all of our loved ones. And the better prepared we are, the less of a crisis it is, and the more opportunity we have to lean into our grief and start that grieving and healing journey. Um, and so I really became obsessed with, okay, how do we make talking about death less uncomfortable, more approachable, and in sort of the mainstream. And that's where the idea for a newsletter came from, and that's also where the idea for death archetypes came from. And it was had the idea for death archetypes before I even started the hospice, but it was really the experience in the hospice that brought a lot of it to light. And for those who aren't familiar with death archetypes, it's a free contemplative personality test to help you explore your mortality. So there's a set of 27 questions that you're meant to answer just instinctively, and some of them are challenging. But that's because contemplating mortality is challenging. And at the end of it, you get your results. You're one of 8 different archetypes. And these archetypes go through a description of the way that you see and approach death and dying. It's kind of like if Myers-Briggs met Enneagram, met a horoscope and human design, just focused on mortality. But the whole thing is about living a fuller life right now. So
Mm.
what I love about talking about death is that you inevitably end up back in the present, and that's what it's all about, is how do we ground ourselves, because all we have is right now. Future is not promised. And so let's live more intentionally and meaningfully. And so the experience at the hospice brought up the top regrets and the potential biggest fears for each archetype, because there's a pretty well-known book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, and that was a huge inspiration as well. So I'll stop there because I'm like, I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore.
I'm tracking with you.
Okay.
Okay. My next question was going to be, what's a death archetype? So thank you for
Okay.
preemptively answering that. And
Yeah.
that makes more sense. Okay. All right. So what's your long-term? Oh, wait. How did you end up back in Denver? That was one we
Oh,
missed.
that's more of a personal thing. I mean, I loved living in Aspen. It's a bubble. It's a snow globe. It's beautiful. It has its
Mm-hmm.
own particular set of difficulties, though. And I was long distance with my boyfriend at the time, now fiance, and so
Congrats.
thank you. I moved to Denver to be with him, but also it just so happened that my technical partner who helped me build Death Archetypes also moved to Denver, and that Colorado is just super progressive and innovative when it comes to death care practices. So it ended up working out really well. It's one of the few states that allows human composting and medical aid assisted dying. So and on the forefront of green burials and all of that.
How serendipitous, right? I mean,
Yes,
that's
yes,
kind of a
truly.
perfect, trifecta.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks for sharing that. So I want to hear about your long-term vision for Hello Mortal. And when I say vision, I mean something very specific. I mean, what unique possibility do you see in the future that you will work to bring to bear through the activities of your business over the next 10 years or so? Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Um, that's such a big question.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Long-term vision. And I'll make the distinction between long-term and 10 years because I think it's going to take longer than 10 years. But long-term is I want every single person to have a basic, bare bones end of life plan. And to me, that means you've named a medical power of attorney. So someone who's going to make decisions for you in the event that you cannot make them for yourself. And you're not only going to have decided who that person is, you're going to have had a conversation with them, and you're going to have discussed what it is that your values are, and what it is that you envision yourself, and so you have a trusting relationship with them. So many people do not do this, and it causes a lot of turmoil for families. And I've seen not only one person actually die, but there be several deaths, metaphorically, in the family of people not speaking to each other because they fought over how mom should have been treated when it came to her medical care. So that's one part of the plan. The second part of the plan is your disposition method. So, are you going to be cremated? Are you going to have a green burial? And there are many options. Again, human composting, people don't even know what that is. So, those are the two very basic things that I think everyone needs to have decided on, discussed, and written down that save your loved ones so much anxiety, guilt. No one is questioning what you wanted and what they did. And it's so simple. So that is like long-term vision. I want every single person to have that. And I want that to be as commonplace as it is to have a driver's license, because it's something that is going to happen to all of us, and we need it. The second thing is a national bereavement policy. We do not have one in this country, which is horrifying to me. And I really want to partner with anyone I can to help push that through and make that an option that all Americans have to exercise and have the time off. It's never going to be enough time, but at the very minimum, you'll have 2 weeks as opposed to 2 days. I think that is going to be huge, like positive, have huge positive impact on our society as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
The other, I think, long-term vision for Hello Mortal is I really want to see us helping people. You talked about like unique aspects. Um, I really want to see us lean into what has resonated with people and what we're good at, which is new and interesting ways to discuss death and to bring it into the mainstream. And something I'm really excited about is the opportunity and the shift that we're seeing of people embracing living funerals. So, sort of calling back to my former experience as a wedding planner, I really want to see more and to help people celebrate their life and to do it before they die. So they actually get to be there to hear the eulogy, to hear the speeches, to hear how they've impacted people's lives.
I love that concept. And I think I first read about the concept of a living funeral in like an Anne Lamott book or something like that. And I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
that's fascinating. And that's so much better. Like,
Yeah.
how amazing. Yeah. And celebratory instead
Yeah.
of, how funerals feel. Okay. That's a big vision. I respect
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're in it to win it. You are here to change
Yes.
the world. Okay.
Yes.
I believe that you can do it.
Absolutely. I thank you. I appreciate your confidence. I mean, I think it's just it has to be done. And it hurts me to see people, go through this and experience things. Death will always be challenging. It will always be sad, but there are things that we can do to improve the experience, hands down.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, hate that you are in the perfect position to
Right.
do this because of what you've had to live through. But what a gift to be able to give other people. And I can see why going through the interview process as you were, approaching the completion of your MBA, being really like, you feel like maybe you didn't fit, like it just didn't
Hmm.
have meaning, or the jobs that you were applying for, what you would be doing did not have the meaning and purpose and impact that you knew that you were going to have on the world. And you knew that that was not the, modality for you to bring forth your full potential. So,
Yeah.
um, my next question is, who's your target audience / customer for Hello Mortal? I hear that it is first like all Americans, but as you know, because you have an MBA, that you have to start with, a customer persona. And so is there
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
particular pocket of the internet that you are targeting as your beachhead, if you will?
Yes, yes. Well, I should say, before I give you that answer, our aspirations are global. Like, I want every single
Yeah.
person in the world to have these two things. And you know, that is not a 10-year plan. That's my
Okay.
lifetime plan.
Yep.
But because there's so many different variations among cultures that are so unique and so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Our target uh customer right now, I mean, I think it depends on what part of the business we're talking about, but um, everyone dies, so everyone is a potential customer, and so it's been really um challenging for me to narrow it down. And I know my business hat, my marketer hat is like, if you're talking to everyone, you're talking to no one. You have to have an ICP.
Mm-hmm.
What's it gonna be? And so I'd say actually right now we're testing that out. There's something called the 4Ds. So it's folks who have recently been diagnosed with a terminal illness, diagnosed with early onset dementia, have gone through a divorce, or have recently experienced a death. And we have identified these different areas of people who are most informed and motivated to make a plan. And so, really, just sort of experimenting right now which one is going to land for us. And I would say another D, actually, 5Ds, adding one to that, are death doulas themselves.
Yeah.
They're a really interesting market. And then my gut also is telling me that we're looking at the sandwich generation. So those are people who are taking care of young kids. and aging parents, and they're incredibly overwhelmed with all of the responsibilities they have of just caring for loved ones, but then throw on work, throw on friends, throw on, dare you try and have a
Life.
hobby, a life
Yeah.
of your own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so really what we're trying to offer them is an efficient way to just get started, because I like to look at end of life planning as a book. And your book can be 1,000 pages or it can be 10 pages. And it's truly customizable to what matters to you. But at the very, as I mentioned before, at a very basic level, everyone just needs the one page. This book belongs
Mm-hmm.
to Maura, and her medical power of attorney is her sister Kate, and her body disposition method preference is human composting. And it can be as simple as that. But there are many other things that you can do that will improve your loved ones' lives, and help set them up for success after you're gone.
Okay. All right. So what services do you currently provide?
So currently, we provide a few different types of services. As I mentioned before, we started because I was so obsessed with this idea of changing culture and making talking about death more approachable and accessible with contemplation. And on the contemplation side, we offer the free Death Archetypes tool. As an extension of that, we also offer a workshop, a Death Archetypes workshop, which is great for um, company retreats, conferences, festivals. It's all about how contemplating mortality can unleash your creativity. So it really lends itself to
Okay.
a whole host of different types of groups.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also offer intimate experiences through Death Archetypes dinners, and these are my favorite thing to host. On top of that, we have our weekly Substack. So that is a free and paid version. And every week we're dropping new contemplations about mortality to help you live well in face of impermanence. And in those in that Substack community as well, if you're a paid member, a benefit is that you get to come to our monthly Death Over Coffee salons, which again are more intimate gatherings where we contemplate and talk about death and dying and life and everything in between. And those are also one of my favorites because people share stories and there's so much resource and insight sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there's Maura, me as the doula. So those services I can offer people, which range from sitting vigil to end of life planning, which again can cover so much stuff, just like simple logistics to legacy planning, ethical wills, to companionship. And then right now we're currently building the MVP for our digital end of life planning tool. So essentially, I'm taking all of my knowledge and experience, personal and professional, of
Mm-hmm.
helping people prepare for the end of life and turning it into a digital platform so that it's convenient for people to fill out. And with that service, we offer 3 levels of a DIY, self-paced, group cohort, and then one-on-one touch points with me.
Okay. Very interesting approach. Cool. Okay.
Yes, yes, yeah.
And I can imagine that marketing is potentially difficult. So, what has your approach to marketing been? What resonates with people? What has flopped?
Yeah. Um, this is like, I love marketing because it feels like it's like a puzzle you have to put together, or almost. It's like you're a detective trying to figure out, the person you're trying to reach and how to best reach
Mm-hmm.
them. Since, small, early stage, we don't have a marketing budget. So I have been doing everything organic, unpaid right now. But, the caveat is that you're always paying for something somehow, whether it's like a Twitter subscription or a scheduling platform, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's like I think for whatever reason I have beef with that term. We're trying to just do it all organic, so we haven't done paid ads. And that's been through my LinkedIn, my Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Again, I've been testing different platforms, seeing what
Mhm.
works. Also through Substack, also through the dinners we do, like that's brand awareness. All of that adds up. And so, yeah, I mean, there's so much we can do on that front that I'm eager to raise the funds to do it so we can.
Mm.
One interesting thing I tried was I dressed up as a Grim Reaper and I interviewed people on the streets of New York City. So like I'm willing to try all the things. Because you got to get creative when you're talking about something no one wants to talk about.
Okay, how did the Grim Reaper video content go over?
It went well. Honestly, I was surprised people wanted to talk to me, but at the time it was
Mm.
also like the height of street interviews on TikTok. So
Yeah.
people were, they knew what was happening when you were walking up to them with a microphone and a weird looking costume. Um, Now there's this trend of people sitting with a sign being like, come ask for advice or come sit with me or something. And I would
Mhm.
love to just sit in a park and have a sign that's like, come contemplate mortality with me or something, or like tell me about who you lost or something like that. But yeah, I mean, the Grim Reaper one was super fun. I definitely would pull that out again at some point.
Yeah. Okay. And you've mentioned we several times. Do you have a small team? Is this you and is your fiance involved in all at all, or who all is involved?
um, uh, he's not, no, he's not officially involved, although he hears all of it.
Sure.
Yes, I don't have a full-time team. I say we because I don't feel like it's just myself. I work with people on a freelance basis. I
Yeah.
have so many friends and family supporting me. Um, and I have a technical partner too. So that's sort of who I mean by we, but definitely uh, it's when I got into this, there was no way I could do it alone. And
Mm-hmm.
this, you don't change culture, you don't change behavior alone. Like it's
Yeah.
planting seeds and having people join the movement is the
Mm-hmm.
only way that we're gonna succeed in making this a better experience for everyone. Yeah, yeah, but that's the we.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a we with an exclamation point. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to ask. So when you go to say like a dinner party or something like that, not one you're hosting where people are there to contemplate mortality, but one where you're a guest, where you don't know people, how do you describe your work to strangers and what's the reaction that you generally get?
I'm still trying to figure out how I should describe my work. Every
Hmm.
time I can feel the anticipation when we go around the room and I'm like, what am I gonna say?
Yeah.
Hmm. Um, and I definitely read the room, trying to figure out what will resonate the most with people. But I typically say I lead with that I'm a death doula because right off the bat, people are like, whoa, what is that? I don't
Hmm.
even know what that is for the most part. Um, and then I share that, I am the founder of Hello Mortal, and we're a platform to help you contemplate, prepare for, and manage life's inevitable end. I'm also the co-creator of Death Archetypes, a contemplative personality test to help you explore mortality. Um, the other day, actually, I was playing around with Chat GPT, which told me that I was a mortality motivator. Um, and I thought that was an interesting take on what I do. And then I share, the experience with opening the hospice and my mom, and it starts to paint a fuller picture. But
Yeah.
I think, I should probably be doing some better analysis with this. But what I've noticed is that um, people who have experienced the death of a loved one, I think tend to catch on quicker right? Because
Yeah.
they've likely had
Yeah.
experience with hospice or
Yeah.
a funeral home or any of that than others.
Hmm.
So it's something I'm still trying to nail down.
Fair enough. That is a
Yeah,
hard nut to crack for sure.
yeah.
And you've, I think, generally covered this, but I'm looking for a summary here. What knowledge do you wish the general public had about death that we currently are just largely ignorant about?
Hmm. Um, I wish that every single human took a death doula training,
Mm,
took the training I took, because truly everyone has the capability to be a death doula, and at some point sort of will quasi be one in their own life. And
mm,
it's something we've been doing forever. It just hasn't necessarily had a name. And over the course of humanity, we were death was right in our face, and we would, bury our own dead in our own backyard with a coffin we made from our own hands. And then, funeral industry came in, and we got very distanced from death itself. So just like, you know, I think people when you're going through high school, I think, and stuff, and you graduate and you go to college, and and some people know how to do this, so I might just be embarrassing myself here, but you're like, I never learned to change a tire. What are taxes? And so that's how I feel about death. Like, we need to be
mm,
educated on this. Like, it's gonna
mhm.
happen to every single person. It happens every 3 seconds. Someone dies. So it's like, we that's what I want people to know. I want them to know they need to educate themselves on this. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
What an unbelievably empathetic and compassionate society we would have if everyone went through death doula
Mhm.
training. Wow.
Mhm.
That's a paradigm shifter for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, it sounds like my next question is, what are you working on right now that excites you? I think it's probably the digital services that you and your team are building out. Is that accurate, or is there more?
Yeah, it's definitely that. It's definitely the weekly Substack. Like, I am just
Mm,
loving writing right now, and putting that out into the world. It's not something I'm used to doing. That has been really exciting, and people's reactions have been really exciting to it as well. Um, just just today, got an email from one of the bigger players in this space saying how much they love my content and that they took the
wow.
test and they'd love to collaborate. And so things are slowly, like, the doors are starting to open. So that's exciting because I think there's so many people who have experienced the death of a loved one. There's so many people working on ideas in this space, and that ultimately we need to just collaborate for the greater good and
Yeah.
push the mission forward. So I'm really excited about um, things that will come through that collaboration. I'm interviewing Katrina Spade, the founder of Recompose, which is the first ever
Mm,
human composting company in the world. I'm interviewing her on my birthday, which is in December, and I'm wildly excited about that. I just think
nice.
she's the coolest human.
Wow.
And then, yeah, I mean, we want to host more of these dinners. So I want to try and do one in New York. I've only hosted them in Denver so
Hmm.
far. Um, and then two other things. I'm trying to link up with, and I've been in talks with some folks who have a PhD in psychology, other palliative care doctors at hospitals, to
Mm-hmm.
conduct a study, a clinical study about death archetypes to see if we can show that it actually alleviates death anxiety and fear around death and dying, because anecdotally, people have been telling us that it does, and sharing it with their therapists and things like that. So if we can get a clinical study um, through, that would be just major for
Yes,
all of
it
our
would.
future efforts. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I have a project in the grief space I really want to work on. This is the whole shiny object syndrome. There's so much I want to do, so much I'm excited about, but yeah, I would just a plug in case anyone is listening. We're looking for grant funding for a grief related project that I think would also have a huge positive impact on society as a whole. So there's a lot cooking that I'm excited about.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Maura, if people could remember only one thing from this episode, what should it be?
Gosh, one thing from this episode. I would say it's so hard to choose just one. I mean, there's such simplicity in death that, like you could die tomorrow. But I think I'd want you to know not to be afraid of death. Because I think a fear of death completely natural and understandable. And maybe you can get to like 1% afraid and never truly zero. But to start thinking about how you can alleviate that fear of death, and that you might, if you think you don't have one, you might subconsciously have one, because Ernest Becker, very famous anthropologist, wrote the book, The Denial of Death. And in it, he talks about how at the root of all anxiety is a fear of death. And that was really powerful to me when I read that. And some people, they do not agree with that at all. But in my experience, I actually see how that it comes to life, and that we have a fear of being seen, of failing, of all of these things that stop us from truly living to a life that we desire, that fulfills us, that brings meaning. And so, I'd like people to remember that they don't, I try not to be preachy. I want people to remember that there's an opportunity and magic and benefits to be had when you start embracing death as a tool to use at your disposal, contemplating death as a tool at your disposal, as opposed to something to avoid.
Well said. Thank you. This has been such an incredibly unique and I think special conversation. So I appreciate your vulnerability and just willingness to really put yourself out there, and that you took the time to find meaningful work, and that you're going to change the world through your business. And I think that is phenomenal. And of course, I can't let you go without telling us more about where we can find you online.
Where you can find me, Maura Ball, MauraBall, all over the place. Twitter and Instagram. And then Hello Mortal, HELLOMORTAL.com is where you can find the newsletter, Death Archetypes, the doula services, everything. We just launched, oh gosh, can't believe I didn't mention it, our book recommendations. So if for contemplation, spirituality, death, grief, children, you name it. If you are going through a time of transition, there's no better gift or act of love for yourself or someone else than a book. I think can be super powerful for people.
Great. Thank you so much for being here, Maura. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners. We know that time is precious. We appreciate you sharing yours with us. We help creators like you at levelupcreatorschool.com, where our team becomes your full stack team of advisors and also includes no fluff creator courses, a vibrant global creator community, and more, all on a subscription basis. See the show notes for more information and a suite of high value free resources. We'll see you next time on the Level Up Creators podcast.